Hey everybody, welcome, or if you're watching this after the event, thanks for joining. I just wanted to reach out to you guys and say hi. I know this is a particularly challenging time for people, and a few of you have asked me to share some of my experiences of what people are going through currently. If you're joining live after the event, feel free just to let me know you're here, say hi, let me know where you're from, and let me know if you have any questions. I'm happy to take all sorts of questions. This is kind of like a short ask me anything. But I did want to just start by saying a few things in case it's useful to share my perspective. Obviously, I'm not a specialist in global pandemics, but some people have been asking me how I've been doing and how I'm thinking about what's going on. So I wanted just to talk to that a little bit. You might have come across this phrase, trust in God, but tether your camel. And that sort of, in a very simple way, sums up where I'm at the moment, which is this sort of mix of doing the things that seem prudent. So mostly canceling in-person appointments, spending time in isolation wherever possible, washing hands, all that good stuff. You know, just doing it within the context of like, there are some things we can control and there's some things that we can't control. And how do we find that place within us? I remember when I used to work more directly with small business owners, I'd often talk about surrendered entrepreneurship. And what I mean by that is, how do you totally show up, make things happen, give it your effort, pursue your passion? And how do you do that at the same time as kind of surrendering and letting go and noticing there are some things that are beyond our control, you know? And all of that to say, this is an interesting time of practice for us. I called this live stream the Great Inward Turn. I know that some of the most profound times of development in my life have been when I've spent a lot of time alone and without too many distractions and had to be with myself, because I got to see what shows up. And sometimes what shows up is not particularly pretty. You know, my fear shows up, my anxiety, the ways that I distract myself, the ways that my mind becomes monkey mind, the way that I'm not very good at just sitting and being with my experience. Some of my most profound times of deepening, and one way of talking about deepening is, you know, how to be with your own experience, whatever that experience is, how to sit with it, how to notice it, how to befriend it, how to be patient with it, have come from times when I've been in big transition and I haven't had too many demands on my time and attention. And I kind of had to be with myself. And rather than everything out there being the kind of the game and the show, you know, like a very externally oriented life, I've been invited, I think, by life to cultivate more of an inward turn, which is, oh, what's the life, what's the game that's happening here? And how can I get more curious about that? And maybe that is one of the opportunities that this slightly strange time is offering us, is to get more deeply in touch with ourselves. Maybe there's some things you want to feel that you haven't yet felt. Maybe there's some things that you want to metabolize that you haven't yet metabolized. And this could be an opportunity to kind of huddle up, get with your journal, get with yourself, and slow right down and make the most of the season. I'm going to say a few quick hellos here. Hello to Connecticut, Los Angeles, Czech Republic, Romania, Sweden, New Jersey. That's so cool. It's a diverse group. San Francisco. Curious how you're all doing. Feel free to let me know how you're doing. Good morning to Seattle, Romania again, Poland. Got some good Eastern European representation here. Rhode Island and Michigan. Hello to you all. Welcome. Thanks for tuning in. Feel free to ask if you have any questions. Feel free to ask. I'll do my best to answer any questions that you have today, whether they're related to, you know, personal growth, relationships, or just kind of the current time. There was one other piece that I wanted to add, just in terms of where this may offer a little bit more hope than people are experiencing. You know, my imagination, and for a long time I was more directly involved in the world of global citizenship, and kind of looking, how do we have better global agreements so that we can perhaps solve things like climate change, or we can come together to look at resource scarcity, and because these are global problems, right? And coronavirus is obviously now a global problem. So one of the kind of hopes that I have is that through something like this, even if it's devastating for some of us and fearful for a lot of us, is that we are going to have to ask some questions about how do we do these things globally? How can we have better agreements? How can we maybe even have types of governance or law that allow situations like this to get handled quicker in a coordinated global way? And so even though it's not the age that we've been living in, which is much more of a sort of turn towards nationalism and a sort of me first orientation, me, my country. And there's obviously something that can also be healthy about really putting your own, self-care and country first at times. But how do we do that in a way that we can also acknowledge there are so many things that are bigger than individual countries, and we need better ways to handle them and deal with them? So it could be that this is a little bit of a shock to the system that forces some questions that aren't necessarily comfortable. But over the long term, maybe there is a perspective that as we grow to become a global society, which is, I sense, well underway and will only continue, that we might be able to look out for each other better, and that we might be able to come together in a more coordinated, effective way. That is one of the hopes that I have. It might take months and years for that to be a reality, but that might also be where we look back on this and say, wow, that was a really difficult time, and excruciatingly difficult for some people and devastating. And it also brought us together in ways that we need to be more attuned to. So that's a little hope and prayer. And just having tracked some of this stuff for a long time, I've been in those global conversations for a long time. We always talked about, wow, there might be some events that bring us together globally, and people would talk about, maybe there's going to be some asteroid strike, or there's going to be some threat that's sort of external to Earth, or people have talked about the dangers of nuclear war. Obviously, mostly we've actually done a good job on that over the last 70 years. Like, that hasn't happened. But maybe something like this that people weren't predicting is a kind of way that can actually bring people together. In a way that we don't actually need to do when most things are going well. We don't have to depend on each other in those ways. But now where we're noticing, oh, actually, I need you to be isolated in order for my safety, and vice versa, perhaps it invites a little bit of a different conversation. Hey to Romania. Oh, wow, you had an earthquake. Sorry to hear that. Wow, that's a lot going on. That was up in Salt Lake. Hosted a virtual St. Paddy's Day party last night. Awesome. We were trying our best to celebrate, but we didn't really have too much. We weren't going to make a specific trip to the shop. Hey to Canada. I know they're shutting the border between the US and Canada today. I hope that doesn't affect you too much. Yet in Nebraska, get in touch with nature. Yeah, absolutely. Definitely take any opportunity to do that. Do you think if we have the opportunity to go to travel to another state to be with family, or take the shutdown as an opportunity and spend it alone? I would probably just trust your own intuition with that. I think it probably depends how well you can cope on your own. But if you're traveling by car on your own, I wouldn't think that the risk factors of getting from one place to another are too high. I'm trying to figure out the best way to find my future boyfriend, partner, husband. Yeah, awesome. Well, you're in the right place for that. I will just give an early teaser that I am going to be launching a new program in the coming weeks, and the focus of it will be about finding Mr. Right. So keep your ears peeled for that, or your eyes peeled. We need to connect to each other and ourselves. Absolutely. Yes, we can do this if we all pull together. Awesome. Hello from Portugal. The Portuguese government is about to declare emergency state. This is an opportunity to rethink our whole lives. Yeah, absolutely. Again, I'll just say, I know this is sort of global, but just bringing it really back personal, I will say the times of difficulty and dislocation in my life have often been the ones that have borne the greatest fruit, because they've forced non-habitual ways of thinking, or just noticing like burnout, or wow, this way that I'm doing things, it really isn't working, but it needed something external for me to kind of put to slow down and stop enough to even notice. So yeah, hey from the French-Swiss border, welcome. Other people, Denise is hiking, nice seeing you. Yeah, thanks for being here. Hey, from Norway, I wish you did more videos and lives during this time. Hearing you talk about any topic surely will make my isolation more bearable. I'm good to hear that. Thanks for your well wishes. Hey to Florida, should we be focusing on men at all right now? That's a good question. I'm curious what your experience and sense of that is. I think, a lot of my teaching is oriented around finding your own center and foundation. So I certainly wouldn't be worrying about men. I imagine that probably the most potent opportunity in this time is the inward turn that I'm talking to, is to befriend yourself more. Maybe notice the places that it's hard to slow down and be with yourself. One of the greatest qualities with self, I think, is patience. And patience to be with your own experience, or that your experience doesn't have to be a particular way, right? So maybe you're anxious right now and you wish you weren't. But what would it be like to not have to wish that away, but just to be present and be a good and loving, caring friend to yourself, noticing, oh, I feel some anxiety, which would be understandable. So I'm not sure that I would be too focused on men right now. I would use this as an opportunity to really be with yourself. And if there's any things that you need to learn, for years, I'll be honest, people would talk about self-love and I would hear that phrase and it would sort of just pass me by a little bit. Like when people would talk about healing, it's like, oh, this is so healing. Oh, I need to love myself more. The solution, self-love. And it didn't really resonate with me. And then one time I just remember reading, think of all the ways that you can love someone else, that you might give them attention, that you might go extra mile for them, that you might, get up in the night and help them or support them. It's like, oh, that much more pragmatic, not just sort of a kind of concept of self-love and, how nicely do I talk to myself? Like, oh, the sort of pragmatic love language ways that I would go out on my way to help other people. I find that hard to do for myself. So therefore, there's my opportunity to really step into greater self-love. So I just name that in case that's useful to any of you in this time. I mean, of course, for most, that's an ongoing journey. And it might be that this is a time that you can kind of accelerate that for yourself. It's also a good time, I think, to notice, what do you need? Maybe you actually need some connection and you can't do that in person. So you want to get on a call or a video call, but that you're able to ask for it, and that actually asking for it, that is the act of self-care or self-love. So yeah, good question. Tony, I thank you for all you do to teach and bless us. You're welcome. It's my privilege. Hello from Bangkok in Croatia. Awesome. Dealing with enforced solitude is hard. Doable, though. Just takes some getting used to. Yeah, I get it. I get it, Sending prayers to all globally. Hi from Guildford. Hey from UK. Hey from Hawaii. Maybe Ohio isn't Hawaii. Hello from, I can't say it today. Hello from Ohio. I'm finding this a wonderful time to press into my good habits. And hi to Clary. So, hey, welcome to all of you. Feel free to push any questions my way, or any things that you've been noticing about your experience that you want to share. Happy to answer questions about anything that's useful. It's also just nice to be with you guys and be in contact and kind of be in community at this time. Families have an opportunity to get to know one another closer at this time of need. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's actually been one of the benefits where we are at the moment. We're actually staying with friends because we only recently landed back in the US, and it's actually been really nice space and me time and downtime. It's actually been nice to be in a different configuration. So I totally get that. If you've just joined us, thanks for joining us. Welcome. This is an impromptu live stream talking about some of the perhaps hidden opportunities of this time with coronavirus and some of the restrictions that we have in place. We've got a pretty cool global audience here. Hey to Florida and Western Australia. My name is Clary with an H in it. Got it. Sorry if I said that wrong. I've noticed it's a great time to invest into creative talent, says Latrice. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Hello to Philadelphia. It's funny, there's a Philly cheesesteak place I always go past in Boulder, and I often think I should have that sometime, but because I'm dairy-free and gluten-free, it doesn't seem like the easiest thing to navigate. I don't know if there's any place that does. And I'm also experimenting with eating sort of little to no meat at the moment, so I'm not sure I'm a prime candidate, but I do often think about that. La Jolla, California, just a thank you for your kindness. You're welcome. I love La Jolla. I've only been there once, but it's the first time I ever paddleboarded was in La Jolla, and I thought it was a really sweet community. So I'm happy to hear that you're there. Good time to cook and bake. Yes, totally. It's funny. One of the things that I'm not, any kind of gourmet cook or chef, but cooking is one of the things that when I take the time to do it, I most enjoy doing it. And I find it a really amazing presencing practice to be with the chopping as I chop vegetables or wash them. It's actually neat, and it's a good way for me to calibrate to myself how busy I am mentally, because if I'm not really able to do that and just kind of drop in, it's normally an indication that I've been running a little bit busy or a little bit up in my head. I'm stepping in the chat late. Can you please summarize your main message for this period of time in terms of hidden opportunity? Thank you. Yeah, I will come back to that. Hey to Bucharest and Romania. Oh, it's Claire. Okay, Claire, I can say. I think I'm saying that right now. Question, I've been voluntarily staying single in the past 2 years. Is that in sort of consensus culture, just kind of, and I'm probably completely Western biased in my view here, but just sort of broadly in Western culture, we tend to undervalue time with self. So I'm not sure it's something I would expect people to understand. And if you've never really had a period of time where you are fully alone and have gotten the value of that, it would make sense to me that you wouldn't aspire to have other people, experience that kind of aloneness. There is a view which I'm pretty open to that says, and this is true for particular types, and for me, I come at it from an Enneagram angle, and I can dig deeper into it if you guys are interested. But for you to really mature in your type, which is mostly about relaxing habitual preoccupations and self-identities. So for you to become less attached to who you need to be, for you to become less fixated on your core trance, and the Enneagram points to 9 core trances, then it actually takes some time alone for most of us to do that kind of maturing, particularly if we never have. If we grew up in a family structure and then we've always had a boyfriend, girlfriend, partner, husband, wife, we've never really been with ourselves. For most of us, that is a really rich opportunity. Now, you can also practice self-observation and notice, what happens when I spend a lot of time alone? All of us at some point benefit from getting outside of ourselves, right? So of course, these are polaric relationships that we want to keep in balance. But I don't think the balance is, only spend time with people. The balance is, can I really go into my aloneness? And then can I kind of really go into my social contact? And am I able to find the mix of those polarities that works for me as an authentic human being? But I'm a fan of aloneness. I'm not a fan of people not getting support or asking for help, right? So sometimes for people who are very self-reliant, there's another type of development, which is, can I actually ask someone to help me clean out my garage? Can I let someone know that I'm struggling and that I want contact? So, the learning lessons are probably individually oriented. What's your development? What does your soul need? But I think one of the things at large culturally we undervalue is the value of aloneness and the ability to distinguish aloneness from loneliness. And of course, when we spend time alone, one thing that might visit us is loneliness. But actually to befriend that and not to be constantly pushing loneliness away so that we never confront it and actually invite it and welcome it and befriend it. Because there's huge value in getting to know yourself and in being able to soothe yourself and resource yourself. So I don't think it's unhealthy to stay single. I think there's a kind of relationship that's even more vibrant on the other side of singleness. I think it's just making sure your singleness isn't a front for other sorts of developmental issues, like I can't ask for help, I can't make requests, I can't rely on people, I can't trust people. Obviously, I'm not saying any of that's going on with you, but just that would be my kind of checklist to check out. Hey, Jack, watching from Denver. Awesome. Hey to Denver. Loving your good vibes. I appreciate that. Thank you. Could you talk a little more about finding our real us, looking internally to know what will truly fill our cup and live authentically? Yeah. I mean, there's so much in some ways to say about that topic, so I'll just hash into it and you can let me know if any of this is sort of fruitful for you. So there's one type of being real that has to do with admitting what is real. And that means what is real in your experience. So if you're feeling sad, that you're not trying to pretend that you're happy, or if you're feeling disappointed, that you can actually metabolize that you feel disappointed. You don't necessarily have to make any stories about it. It doesn't have to mean any particular thing, but it's sort of the simple kind of get with the program of what you're feeling is probably the simplest way of saying it, and then you could expand, well, what are you feeling? Also, what are you sensing, right? Which is what are you experiencing in your body? Where are you tight? Where are you relaxed? Do you have pressure, temperature, sensation? There's a whole sort of list of things that you can start to notice about your bodily experience. And that's like about being a present and embodied human. So that's one place to start. Like, what's your real experience? And can you start admitting it to yourself? And can you start revealing it to other people? Second track for a lot of us is just noticing what feels kind of good or right. Like being able to be more in touch with your intuition, noticing which friendships really kind of have a right feeling to you. And right doesn't mean easy, by the way, right? Sometimes people are in our lives to wake us up. But if I'm constantly holding up a friendship and the other person never really reaches out to me, why am I doing that? Like, why don't I take a stand for a bit more mutuality? Or if my work constantly feels like I don't really get anything nourishing from it, do I have to keep doing that work? Could I start doing something part-time as a side hustle that might be more enlivening to me? So there's, I used to call it essence work or essence business, like finding what's the true you and can you express that more in your work. Now, that's sometimes an opportunity that not all of us have, right? We have dependents and mortgages and financial responsibilities, and it's not always easy to find a way to do the work that you want to do as well as take care of those things. So, there's your own journey with that and what's most important to you. There's another kind of finding the real us that for me has to do with dropping the self-concept. And that can sound like a bit of a fancy sort of spiritual philosophical thing, but it's sort of like, give me the core beliefs that you hold about yourself. And what if we just put them aside and didn't have to have them as true, right? So some people walk around, I'm a kind person, I'm a generous person, I'm a loving person. And by the way, all of that could be true. We just don't necessarily need to form a self-image out of it, because when we do that, it tends to mean that we reject, suppress, or repress the things that aren't that, right? So we then can't be with our anger, we can't be with our hatred, we can't be with the darker side of being a human, which clearly, well, I say clearly, in my experience, most all of us have, and it's a question of how much are we in touch with that rather than is it actually there. So that's another way to be yourself, is to notice, maybe sometimes I have a bit of a persona, right? For me, historically, I probably had a good listener persona. I probably had a nice guy persona. I probably had a visionary persona. I was always into the next big thing. And that sometimes made it difficult for me to just take a cup and just enjoy a drink and be, I once had an astrologist said to me, you got to learn how to lead a big and small life. And at the time I was probably a bit down on leading a quote small life, just enjoying the quiet moments, or that it was okay to just go for a walk for a couple of hours because I wanted to. There was always something bigger and better to be pursuing. And over time, life has seemed to be able to relax that away from me. So some of us have an image that, we're ambitious and we're driven and we've got to be successful, or we've got to be liked is a huge one. Obviously, we've got to be liked or approved, or people have to love us, or I have to be so unique, or people have to get that I'm a genius. And if you don't get that, I don't feel seen. Or maybe I'm a tragic romantic, and then if you don't see that I'm heartbroken, then I feel missed. We carry all sorts of these things. And so the more you notice them, the more you can distinguish them. And perhaps, the metaphor would be like you can wear them like a cap. So you're like, yeah, cool. At the moment, I might be in my good listener persona. When I'm coaching, I obviously want to really drop in with people and spend a lot of time listening. That's an awesome skill. I'm glad I have that. And if I'm only doing that, then it creates unequal friendships. Then people don't get to know me or to experience what's real and true and revealed in me. So for a lot of us, to find the real self, we have to drop the not self. And one way of talking about the not self or the not selves are personas, these masks or images that we find ourselves kind of walking around inside. And it's subtle and it's scary. For the first period of time where I felt like I lived with much less identity, it was also a bit like, well, who am I? Who am I to anyone else? I've always been known as, as a go-getter, or as a change maker, or as a social entrepreneur, or as a coach. And if I'm sort of wandering around like, yeah, I don't have too much identity right now. I don't really care too much whether you see me in a particular way or not. And I also realize you seeing me in a particular way probably has as much to do with you as it does to do with me sometimes. That initial move is really strange. And for me, at least, was quite discombobulating and a bit like can I hang on to something? And it seemed like at that time in my life just took all my identities away, took the business I had, took the relationship I was in, took the country I was in. So it was sort of like, wow, okay, I can try and claw on, but really life has other plans for me. And on the other side of that, and sure, at times I'm sure I get into an identity and an image. I'm not saying I have a bubble beyond that, but versus where I was, mostly that doesn't seem to be the main edge of my work. It's like, oh, there's a huge freedom if I walk into a room and I don't really care, not because I'm detached, but like I don't mind too much whether you think I'm awesome or you think I'm nothing, or you see me or you don't see me. Of course, I want my friends to see me. Of course, I want my family and my partner to see me. But if I've got a bit more freedom around other people, then I get to kind of be myself more, and I can have a big day where I do big things in the world, quote, or I can have a day where I'm so tired and lethargic that I just want to crawl under a rock or go for a walk in nature and not really care too much about the rest of my life. That's okay. So it's sort of like permission and freedom to keep sort of showing up more true to what you actually want to do, rather than maybe what you think you need to do or what other people think you need to do. And I'm not saying that all social obligations are bad. I think we're obligated to each other in ways that we don't even realize sometimes, and that can be really good and healthy. But there's a sort of process of even more individuation where I don't have to justify, was this a great use of an hour of my time? It's like life has a more of an intrinsic quality. Like, yeah, right now I'm chopping vegetables. I'm not trying to chop. For me in the past, it would be how quickly could I chop the vegetables? There was this, some of you, the Brits, this as Men Behaving Badly was a Men Behaving Badly. You might be like, yeah, that's my core experience of dating. No, Men Behaving Badly was a TV series in England back in the day. Maybe it still runs, but I think it's back in the day. And there's this one episode where the guy talks about how to go to the toilet more quickly. So a friend is telling me about this episode. And it's basically, it's pretty gross. But while you're peeing, if you're next to the sink, you can already start to turn the taps on and you can actually flush before you finish the toilet, right? This is sort of ridiculous humorous stuff. But the part of me back then that wanted to be able to do things quicker and more efficient was like, wow, there's something cool about that. Let me try and take that on. So that whole orientation to reality, it has to be quicker, faster, now more productive, has really relaxed in me. And I'm much more interested in the quality of the moment, the presence of the moment. And I think for most people, as they get more oriented to the intrinsic quality of each moment, the real self emerges more, because you're no longer looking at yourself as an instrument that has to just do certain things. You're more like, I'm a living, breathing, experiencing being that has wants and desires, and I can notice more about myself. Just like if you're super busy at work, I'm not a parent. I maybe hope to be a parent one day. I'm not a parent, but if you're super busy all day in work, you come home and talking to a child. My imagination is if you're stressed and busy, you don't have that much time to be quality in your presence with them. And it's exactly the same thing with yourself. If you're stressed and busy and overworked a lot of the time, it's much harder just to be, hey, buddy, to myself. How's it going, buddy? What's here? Are you okay? Do you need anything? It's like that kind of quality of conversation with yourself is much harder to have. And to link this back to the question of, I'm just stepping in here. If you didn't join me at the beginning, I'm saying this is the opportunity of this time, I think, is about an inward turn, is being with yourself, befriending yourself, asking yourself questions that you might not have asked, like, what season of life are you in? How am I doing? Which friendships in my life feel authentic to me? Are there any adjustments I want to make? Are there any requests I want to make of my friends? Maybe you have a friend that just never calls you, and that doesn't really work for you, and you actually want to be able to name it, and the risk is maybe the friendship goes away, but if it does, it probably wasn't the most authentic friendship anyway. Where do you feel most alive in your life? What are the energy or commitment in your life, whether that's posting on Instagram, looking after your kids, making money in your work, different projects you've got on, cleaning the garage, going to yoga, stuff to look after yourself, kind of get all of it in one view. And often when we do that, people find like, wow, my life is pretty chaotic and pretty kind of overwhelmed. Or sometimes they look at it and they're like, yeah, I could take some more things on in my life. I've kind of been minimizing. But the majority of my clients find, if you think of all the things that you have some kind of attention on, it's a lot. And a lot of us benefit from simplifying, kind of cutting back on agreements, so that when we make an agreement with someone, it's much easier to show up for it. It's not like, I should do that or I could do that. It's like, yeah, actually, realistically speaking, I have space for it. So another way of being more authentic, or another thing that you could do during this time, is just to take that inventory of all your commitments and agreements with yourself and other people. Maybe you look after an elderly aunt or something. That's a commitment. It takes 3 hours a month. Get that down. Maybe you don't go to yoga, but you have a yoga membership. So at the back of your mind, you still have a commitment. I used to have a lot of what I call aspirational commitments, yoga sessions that would appear on my calendar that would be repeat appointments I'd never go to, other classes that I would never go to, and many things that you can't put your attention on. If you're able to turn more inward, then there's huge benefits of that when you actually come to be in relationship. For a lot of you know, I talk about the 80-20 principle of, can I keep 80% of the tension over here with myself? The benefit of that when I go in a relationship is I can regulate myself more. I can handle my own triggers more. I can project on you less, because I notice that there might be stuff that's actually coming up for me, and I don't need to just make it about you. I might even get more curious when you trigger me, because I maybe want you to trigger me, because I get that the triggers are the places that I want to heal. So, all of that stuff, I think, is an opportunity of this time to just really slow it down, renegotiate what you have in your life and what you want, what's real to you. Hope that made sense. All right, flicking back through here. It's definitely a skill to being able to hold this in the place where I last was. Okay, it's Claire. We established that. I've been voluntarily staying single the past 2 years. I'm loving time myself. Is that healthy? Yep. I'm finally going to take some guitar lessons online. Awesome. I'm no guitar player really, but I have a little of musical side where I can sing and hold down a few chords. I might have to expose that to you guys sometime. I'm in a 14-day isolation. Just got back from England. Thanks for the insight. Wow. Well, thanks for taking the responsibility for doing that. I feel grateful to have flown back from Europe before we got close to any of these kind of travel bans and airport confusions. Jack, you have really white teeth. Oh, thanks. I think I got something in here, but I appreciate that. I don't, whether that's true or not, because I definitely have noticed being over here in the US that there are quite different expectations and dental standards. And so I had sort of, and maybe this is a self-identity. I had kind of the identity of like, oh, I go to the dentist and generally they say good things to me. And I think for my first 30 years, I only had one thing that it's not even a filling. It's what they call it's like a type of restorative resin that's sort of like a pre-filling in UK speak. And then coming over here and seeing different dentists for second opinions and them all agreeing that I needed, 6 to 10 fillings. And I was like, what? So things, I'm just curious what's on your plate. So one of the things that is on my plate is home searching. We are looking to buy a new house. And so that's definitely got a certain amount of my attention. And also a lot of the open houses and things aren't as busy as they were. I'm also going to be launching a new online program in the coming weeks. So that's a lot of what I've been working on the last couple of days. Kind of excited about that. It's something that I've had in the sort of background, like, oh, I want to do that. And it hasn't quite been the right time. There's lots of other things that I was launching last year, lots of attention on kind of growing this platform on YouTube. So I think it's coming into season cycle for kind of April, May, June. And I'm excited about that. And also just kind of taking it easy a little bit. I had been in a cycle. I've had a lot of attention on my health. And I had been in the cycle of swimming pretty much every day and, decent swims like half a mile plus. And obviously, so I'm looking forward to kind of re-engaging with that on the other side of this, because I feel like I was getting quite a lot of benefits from it. The other thing I've been doing a lot of over the last 6 months, on hold for the moment, but kind of looking forward to getting back into more routines. When I don't pay attention to some of that stuff, I find that I kind of get to a point in the day where I'm a little like, I'm kind of a bit spent, and I actually don't need to get to that point if I have other sort of health practices in the mix. Love from Scarborough. Awesome. I've actually never been to Scarborough. Scarborough is in Northern England, but my experiences of Northern England, I've had some good experiences of Northern England, and I'm sure I'll get to Scarborough one day. I'm a 6 or was years ago. Say more about that trance, please. Okay, so this is an Enneagram related question. So I want to find the right degree of detail with this, because I know some of you will be familiar and some of you will be unfamiliar with the Enneagram. But the Enneagram posits that there are 9 human types, which I think of as 9 core trances. So the trance is the thing that preoccupies your attention, that if you were able to relax it, you would be more free to be yourself. That's sort of like the central claim of the Enneagram. And so the core trance of the 6 is foreseeing problems. Like, what's the problem and how can I fix it? So 6s tend to be, on the upside, great troubleshooters because they think about problems and risks more clearly and earlier than other types. But imagine, if you and I are trying to sit down to an intimate conversation and most of your attention is going on what could go wrong, what's the problem? That becomes its own form of distortion, because it basically means it's difficult to trust that things are okay. The 6th way of trusting that things are okay is, if I've thought of all the problems and I've mitigated them, then I can relax. And this, by the way, is true of any of the head types, so types 5, 6, and 7. And it's also true of any of us if we have a tendency, as we do culturally at large, to get stuck in our heads, that we kind of want to solve a lot of problems mentally, rather than perhaps noticing, well, what's true for me? What's my intuition? What's life calling me to? So the core problem for the head types, of which 6 is at the heart, no, let me not say heart, that's the wrong metaphor. 6 is at the middle of the head types, right? 5, 6, 7. So it's the core type. The core issue is trust. And I tend to, when I don't feel like I can trust, I get ahead of myself into the future. And I start asking myself questions about, what if that conversation goes badly? Or what if I get fired? Or what if we run out of money? Or what if the mortgage payment doesn't go through? Or what if? And you want what if to be consciously deployed, like, hey, we're doing a risk mitigation strategy for our business. Great. Ask your craziest what if questions. But what if is not the best place to continue to center your life around. What if X problem could happen? So 6s learn, how to quieten the questioning mind or the doubtful mind. And this is it's a significant structure in all of us. A lot of times I've had to learn how to distinguish doubt and curiosity. I doubt something and I'm curious about it. They have quite different flavors. Curiosity kind of opens you up, like, oh, I'm curious. I'm curious if this is going to work out. Let's see. Rather than, I doubt this is going to work out. Now I'm worried and I'm anxious and I'm trying to kind of come up with a strategy. So that's the core trance of 6s. But, I also, I own, I have a lot of 6 in myself. I think my dad's a type 6. I think my sister's a type 6. I think the UK at large is a kind of type 6 culture. 6s are their strong suits are team players, reliable, conscientious, security oriented. They really look out for the core people around them in a way that's completely profound. So, I'm giving you the trance, and let's, also acknowledge there's something so beautiful about every type, however tranced or not. Claudia, I have a flight booked for tomorrow morning to go back home. I don't know if I'll be allowed to travel, so I surrender to what I cannot control and accept whatever comes. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, that surrender really is the piece that I think we're being invited to. I think it's hard to find that balance sometimes between being on top of things, proactive, taking the right measures, but also kind of surrender, like, who knows ultimately whether you or I might get this. There's a sort of like, this is a bit bigger than us that we can kind of relax into, not from a place of resignation. Like, okay, yeah, just throw my hands up. If I'm going to get it, I'm going to get it. If I don't, I don't. That's resignation. That's fatalistic. That's fatalism. Fatalism is different than I trust. I trust is, I don't really know what life's divine plan for me is. Maybe sometimes the worst thing becomes the best thing. Maybe sometimes you need to get something bad in order to grow in certain ways. Sometimes you have to have a bad relationship in order to realize what a good one is. Sometimes you have to go bankrupt to know the value of money. Sometimes you have to have a health trauma in order to value your wellness. There's so much mystery in what life has in our path that we often want to hold off by our own mechanisms of control. And so if that is any of your work, as it is for most of us, just noticing the places that you want to have certainty where, actually there is something inherently uncertain about life. And that's actually a good thing. If life is only certainty, it's sort of like, yeah, where's the mystery? Where's the place that surpasses our understanding? Where's the room for life to bring things in that are better than you'd even thought? Where's the expression of talents that are dormant in you that could come online at any point and right timing? So there's this sort of place of living your life, which is not just, I need to have it under control. It's kind of like, yeah, we all need a minimum amount of security and certainty just to kind of feel safe and show up and have some predictability. I get that. But a lot of the beauty, I think, in life is in the things that we don't yet know and that can be revealed to us. So I think that is a good opportunity for this time. Denise, clearing out closets, decluttering, awesome. Veda loves her alone time to recharge, perfect. I'm an 8 on the Enneagram. I've always had to fend for myself. I don't mind being alone. I've only recently befriended loneliness when it comes to visit. I've been single for 5 years. Awesome. I like that you're befriending your loneliness. I think that's profound work, and it would surprise me if that doesn't yield important growth in your life. Tara, taking this time to grow, learn, develop some things I've been wanting to do and support others as much as possible. Wishing the best for all. Thank you. I appreciate that. Hey from the DMV. Thank you. My imagination is that you mean the DMV like the Department of Motor Vehicles. Is that right? Maybe you're there in line or you work there. Or that's an acronym for a country that I am not seeing right now, but I think that's what you mean. Thank you, says Eva. I actually never feel alone, lonely. I'm well surrounded by family and friends, but it's true that I don't reach out to others for help. We'll spend time analyzing that. Got it. And maybe just a cheeky invitation. Don't spend too long perhaps analyzing it. Maybe just step into it, right? So for people who are less likely to ask for help, one of the patterns can be that before I tend to want to feel comfortable before I step into action. And actually the edge of development can be, I want to step into action before I feel comfortable, because it will just allow me to do so many more things than I kind of maybe sit analyzing. I don't know if that's your pattern, but just a cheeky invitation if that's helpful. This is a great time to meditate, self-reflect, plan, script, and enjoy free time to relax and live in the moment. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. My house is now sparkling. Great opportunity for self-reflection. Hey, I'm loving these reflections, guys. This is awesome. I sometimes do kind things so I can feel good about myself. Yay. Do you think this is a good moment to go into online dating? I see it as a good moment which can slow things down and better get to know each other. What are your thoughts on that? Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think it is probably an opportunity for online dating. I perhaps my sort of thing I'm most excited about, and this is just a Jackism, is the ability to spend time with self, the sort of reflective inward turn quality that I've been talking to. And this might be an opportunity for you to, practice online video chats, right? Or a way of doing dating that stops things being sort of perma chats, which is one pattern I see in online dating where people text, but it doesn't really ever amount to anything. But there's something that can kind of sit between perhaps texting and going and investing in time in an evening is just you having some real-time connection with someone. And what's that like? The other practice that you could notice for online dating is you could notice what gets called, and I call unconscious attraction, right? So you can flick through profiles, notice the people that give you the quickest, most familiar kind of zing, and then get curious, go back through the people you've interacted with and dated or partnered in your life, and notice if there's anything that's archetypically similar about them, and notice if that pattern serves you. Because it seems that for a lot of us, there's this unconscious attraction pattern where the people that we're sort of most zinged by at a kind of animalistic level, thoroughly the people that we have real compatibility with. And so there's sometimes this learning, like you learn to appreciate fine wine, there's a learning to appreciate this different quality of attraction that isn't just, so for some of us, an unconscious pattern of the caregiver or caregivers that we grew up with, but it might be something else. And I can kind of go in a bit more detail about that, but just notice if the people that you're most excited by, if you're like, has that really in my life, if I think of anyone that has that similar energy or that similar kind of pattern, has that really transpired as someone that's been good for me to connect with? Sometimes we have to learn how to grow our attraction over time. Not that there wasn't any attraction in the beginning. I think there's always sort of like some minimum effective dose of like spark, connection, call it what you will. But sometimes we have to learn how to grow that over time with the right person, and noticing how we actually feel in their presence, rather than the person perhaps that gets us very quickly excited, but it tends to burn bright and fast and quick, and it doesn't really stabilize into a relationship. So that's something else. You can start to look at different facial patterns and you can start to read energy, is another way of saying that, and just notice these kind of pings in your system and where that takes you. Nice, love my own company, but nice to have someone to love. Yeah, totally, I get that. Hi, Jack. My ex wants to be friends, and I declined 4 months ago. I see him weekly at Rec Club. How to respond to his greetings? I try to ignore and find a spot away, but when he says hi, it disturbs my balance. Yeah, I hear you. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. I don't know if it's easy just to get to a point of neutrality and equanimity when it comes to exes. And I'm curious if there's anything that you need to metabolize, either on your own or with a coach therapist, or even if there's anything that you need to say to him. Right? Sometimes, in order for friendship to even be a possibility, and I'm not saying you even need to be open to that, but there's there's something I kind of need to say, which is you really hurt me, or I was really disappointed that it didn't work out with you, and it's taken me a long time to grieve, or actually I think you were kind of cowardly in how you treated me, or whatever the thing that needs to get said, that because that has, you might want to make a request of him. I mean, it sounds like what I'm hearing, you don't really want to be in contact with him, but you sort of run into him at this weekly thing. So maybe there's a request to say, hey, if you could do this for me, could you just not say hello to me? Because actually I'm still kind of getting over something, or that just doesn't feel good to me. And then maybe there's a way that you can do it, which actually comes from a little bit of softness or vulnerability. So it doesn't actually need to provoke too much of a response over there, because it's hey, this is about me. You're not doing anything wrong, but there's something that I need that would feel good to me. I don't know if you could do this for me. Now, he might be yes, no, maybe, or counter offer. That's fine. But at least then you're kind of bringing your truth into the system, right? And my intuition, I don't know if this is right, but often it's the lack of truth getting brought into the system that makes something ongoingly perhaps difficult. And if it's really difficult for you, you may also sometimes make a decision yeah, actually, even though it bums me out and I have to travel further, I'm going to go to this other rec club. I won't go to rec club for 3 months. I've had people who end up changing office cubicles or shifting to another part of the company because seeing someone day in, day out, either an ex or an unrequited love, it's just really difficult, to the human in us that might want something that's not available, or might not want to be in touch with unfinished business. So that's my curiosity. And then my other piece is, things that disturb our balance. So I'm curious what you mean by that. Might be that you're getting triggered, right? Might be that you're having a habitual contraction. But also not be too afraid of those, because they also point us to things, right? They point us to places where we maybe need to express more, or hold a clearer boundary, or make a request that we haven't made. So, said differently, yes, I love it. I love my equanimity. I love my serenity. I love feeling undisturbed, right? I sometimes feel most free when I'm just like a clear pond. And I have to admit, sometimes I don't like it, but the places that I grow are often the places where people disturb me, right? Where I can't just be left to my own device and my own sort of amniotic fluid of my own womb. It's yeah, life, work, relationship, these things have edges, and sometimes we feel disturbed. And sometimes that's pointing us to a deeper thing that we want to look at, because there's a truer freedom on the other side of it. I think back in the day, I used to think that anytime someone disturbed me, I was unevolved. And then eventually kind of realized, oh, actually, there's all sorts of people who preach peace, but really they're doing that by not being in contact with the more difficult things, right? Whether that's being in contact with their anger, or their fear, or the places that they actually aren't showing up for themselves or other people. Again, I'm not saying any of this needs to be true for you, but just I'm curious about sometimes the desire for, do you have any particular tips on online dating? I'm a fan of authenticity in online dating, and that means just being able to communicate your real-time experience and desires where possible, right? So if it's hey, I noticed we're talking, but I'd love to go on a date. Are you interested in that? Trying on personas, right? So I talked about relaxing habitual personas, right? So if you're the good girl, or the bad boy, or the rebel, or the needy one, or the fill in the blanks, that if that's your habitual way of being, you can relax it. One way you can relax it is actually by practicing a new persona, right? So maybe you have no access to your rebel, or you have very little access to your bad girl. And online dating can also be a place that you try these sort of unfamiliar ways of being out at a bit of a lower risk than kind of going to a dinner party with people you know. So that's something else I would invite into online dating. How can you have fun with it? Dating is part of life. It's in business terms, dating is sales and marketing. If you never enjoy your sales and marketing, it's hard to grow a business. So you want to find a way of doing it that works for you, right? And for some people, that's yeah, it works for me to have a really quick coffee. I get in the current environment, that might be difficult, or it works for me to go to a really beautiful place, or to have a mini hike in nature, but somewhere where there's enough people walking dogs that I feel safe, or a fun date for me is we actually, we're going to eye gaze with one another, or you're going to interview me for 15 minutes and I'm going to interview you, or, feel free to have fun with it. Because I think if you're not finding a way to express yourself in dating, it's a bit harder to get to that result because it's like you're not enjoying the process. There's an intrinsic side to dating that has nothing to do with the result. It doesn't matter whether you get another date or whether you like the guy or he likes you and you don't like him or vice versa. It's kind of like, enjoy the journey, smell the roses. So I would also use this as a time to reflect, like, what is the dominant K, right? That's an NLP term. What is the dominant internal felt experience of my dating? What's the background mood to my dating? Am I resigned because I don't think it's ever going to work? Am I habitually optimistic but then disappointed? Am I closed? Am I overly familiar and open? Am I gushy? Am I fearful? Before I go on the date, do I become an investigative FBI agent and I, check their, bank statements or their Facebook history or, kind of what's going on there? And just notice, is that how you want to be? Is that the most authentic, aligned version of you? Because it's hard to kind of go from not being so authentic to kind of being more authentic. Can I see this recorded? Yeah, this will show up as a video on my channel once we are done. Plenty of conflict. Sorry, my system slowed down here. 1 second. Can't believe I caught you live. Welcome. Okay, so a couple of people here that aren't being particularly helpful. So, okay, I might not be able to get to all these comments, but thank you for them. What are the best effective online dating sites? Do you recommend this? I was thinking about hosting an online virtual speed dating event. Wow, that's cool. Never been to one of those. Not sure how it would work. I'm a sort of like a fundamentals guy, right? So what I mean by that, let me put it into another context. So people often used to ask me when I would do more coaching around kind of business and productivity. That's kind of where I started off when I was coaching individually adults. I coached teens and 20-somethings for a long time. And they'd always want to know, what's the best app? And I was a bit more oriented towards, you can have the best suite of apps in the world, but if your underlying kind of orientation to starting, doing, and completing is kind of off, like there's one of those things you struggle with, like you never start or you can never really complete and finish, or you don't know how to prioritize things, so you constantly have so many things on your awareness, like that stuff to me, it might just be where my gifts and my attention is more important, so you could be on OkCupid, Match.com, Tinder, any in each of these places, and you can probably find a whole lot of trash, so to speak, and a whole lot of like authentic connection. It's more about how you are showing up and engaging with the platform. So that is more where I would go. And also there's probably people who have studied particular dating apps more than I have. That's not really my focus. It's more, how can you be yourself in the process? How do you reach out to people? What happens when someone's reaching back to you? Can you cut off a connection that's not serving you? Can you keep asking for what you want whilst being grateful for what you receive? That's the sort of more underlying fundamental energetic level is probably more my orientation to this. Because I think you can find good people, so to speak, anywhere. I think it's less about the gross analysis of sort of what's the sociological data that this dating platform gives versus, what do I want? I want to meet this type of guy. Am I meeting him here? Okay, cool, I'm not. So I'm going to change my approach. Either I'm going to do something differently, or I might try another platform. I might try meeting people in person. I guess in current context, that's a little more difficult. But how am I showing up would be my dominant question versus, is this an effective platform? But that's my approach. Yesterday, I actually rubbed my skin down with shea butter after showering. Awesome for me that I neglected. Awesome. I love hearing that. I just talked about online dating. Another user. I'm just going to hide here. Sorry for some of the comments. Thank you so much. Good stuff to think about today. Are you married, Jack? Yes, I am married. Let's keep moving again. I kind of like quarantine. I moved back in with my dad after a long abusive relationship, never got to rest, had to go. Now I get to heal and really recover from proper rest. Awesome. Leah, hey, Jack is live. Yes, welcome. This is live. Missed the beginning of this. I'm unsure the topic. COVID-19, I'm assuming. I'm really using this as an opportunity to connect with people. It's an Ask Me Anything session, so you're welcome to ask questions. I'll get to as many as I can. And I did begin with a perspective that you can go back to once we finish. You can go back to the beginning of this video, just kind of my general sense of what this time could offer as an opportunity. President Trump will save us. Okay, great. Bob Smith. Feeling you. Hi, Mr. Butler. Looking forward to seeing you in Scarborough. Okay, we had a bit of back and forth here. Not super productive. Used to be a strong 5-wing. Awesome. Hayla from East London. I'm a violin teacher. Love it. And the 2 schools I teach in are closed this week. Lots of Google Hangout classroom teaching for me. I'm feeling overwhelmed with more IT use. Yeah, I can actually relate to that. I don't do great kind of looking at the screen all day long. So maybe there's a way you can just find your own thresholds with that. I know for me, definitely I need to balance it with real sunlight and outdoor time. Yo to the Western Cape, South Africa. It's funny, another reality. We actually would have been in South Africa at this time. I'm kind of grateful that we got the call to come back to the States when we did. Need to negotiate long space with housemates for conference and teaching. Yeah, I think this is a thing for a lot of us, is if there's more of the instincts, the social, sexual, self-preservation instinct. And type 7, social 7 with a 6-wing is my best guess, but I also have quite a lot of access to my 9. And some of the people that first taught me the Enneagram were convinced that I was a 3. I don't actually think that's true. But what I'm noticing is, I think versus when I first learned the Enneagram, 8 to 10 years ago, I do feel a little less fixated in my type. I mean, obviously that's our aspiration. So there's a risk that might be my own, my own ego or self-hubris or something. But I feel like I have a bit more access to other energies than perhaps I did historically, which I think is one opportunity with the Enneagram. Probably, of all the types, maybe the one I still have least access to routinely is probably my 8. And I've probably become a bit more self-pres over the years. Like I'm more concerned about foundation and put more time into my health. And that might also just be, getting a bit older. I go to therapy. It's helped a lot. I just went through a breakup less than 2 weeks ago, and then the virus thing happened. Definitely has taught me you never know. Yeah, life is full of surprises. Absolutely. I was just reflecting that this would be an interesting time to be going through a breakup. So yeah, I feel for you. I hope you're doing all right. DMV in Washington, D.C., Maryland, Virginia. Awesome. Let's go through here, see if we can find some real questions. It always amazes me how people find the time to not be particularly productive. How to react if he doesn't text me, say he doesn't have time, but he texts other women on WhatsApp all day and night? I would say not your guy. And that might be a little bit of Jack tough love, but guys find time for things. We all have incredibly busy cycles. But I would even say this is for a thing that comes up for me in friendship. If someone's like, yeah, I'm just too busy to get back to you, or I'm too busy, and that sort of habitual excuse, that's not really the place that I want to engage with people from. So I would say, what would it take for you to realize that maybe this isn't your guy, and to downshift the connection? Okay. Great time to live the old-fashioned way, to self-entertain, get the house sorted, and know your kids more intimately. Awesome. Love that perspective. Liana, hello. Can't believe I catch you live. Awesome. I'm happy you did. Our leaders need our prayers. Yep. I agree with that. It's going stir crazy. Lots of laughs. Let's just kick this person off here. Sorry that we've had a little bit of a reduction in some of the quality comments. Hey, Central Brunette, thanks for being here. What is your question? I told a guy that I knew for 12 years that when we kiss, have sex, I get attached. He texted me 2 weeks later asking how I'm faring with the virus. What do you think? I thought I'd never hear from him again. Why did he text me? You know, I'll just say this. We can spend all sorts of time imagining, like, why did a guy text me or why did he do something? And it can sometimes be a little distraction to the question of, is this my guy? Like, if you're looking for a committed relationship, and not all of you are, but most of you, I think most of the time on this channel are. If he's not your guy, we can major in all sorts of analysis about that, why he does something, why he shows up the way he does. I just encourage you to really focus your energy attention on what you want. Most guys want connection, right? Whether they're wanting a committed partnership or anything else, they want connection. So they want to reach out and text. That's part of life. That's part of human, absolutely entitled to do that. The question more is, what is it that you need in order to honor yourself and authentically honor your own desires and your own desire for partnership, if that's true for you? So if there's someone that you've known for 12 years that hasn't put a claim on you, probably not your guy, right? I think most guys can work out fairly quickly, and I'm talking months or a year or two, whether they really want to make something happen long term with you. And if they aren't doing that, you know, it could be that this is not the season, or there's some obstruction reason, or they're in a relationship that they're trying to extricate from. But that can be communicated, like, hey, I really want to be with you, and it's really inconvenient because I'm still processing getting over my ex, and so I'm going to reach out to you on the other side of that. Cool. That's very different than I've known you for a long time and you're kind of an option, or we're friends with something, benefits, I don't know. It's not really clear. You're not having a clear energy coming towards you. That can be really confusing. So are you from the US? I need to ask a question about the government cash check. You're welcome to ask that question. I may not be the best person to answer that. I do live in the US. Yeah. How to cope with the fact that he may be talking to other women while dating. Yeah, again, so that's a similar one, right? So I wouldn't get too overly preoccupied by it, because if he's your guy, at some point, probably in the near future, he's going to stop doing that and prioritize you. Or I just don't think he's really your guy, that he's not really taking seriously keeping you safe, prioritizing the connection. And, you know, if it's that, you know, perhaps there's something on your side that's like, maybe you're feeling insecure or jealous and there's some work to do there, that's okay. That can be included, but I would bring that into the relationship. And it might be that there's some requests that you have of him so that you can get the safety you need beneath you, in order that it's easier for him to, if he's talking to other women and that's actually legitimate, right? Like it's got a friendship context or a work context. But ideally we can influence our partners in these situations. We can say, hey, this might just be my own insecurity, but it doesn't feel good when I see you texting blah, blah, blah. Like, could you text less, or could you include me when I text, or could I meet her, or something that actually allows you to build some safety. Being broken up with and don't know if I should try getting him back, or if he's a bit of a narcissist, or just normal behavior a few months after the breakup, or just because of misunderstandings. Yeah, I'm generally a fan of, if a guy's broken up with you, you can make it clear if you want, like, hey, I really wanted this relationship to work, or I'd really like to explore this again. But I would then leave it in his court, because I think you want the energy of actually he's coming back to want to make something work, rather than you're trying to claw the relationship back. So I think a bit like green lighting in dating, where you can say, hey, would you take me on a date? Or I'd love to get to know you more. But then you actually let the guy kind of step into that space. Hi, Jack. Callie, thank you for going live today. You're helpful to listen to. Awesome. I appreciate that. Hi from California, loves. Not everything has to be productive. Some people's natural personality isn't to take crap. Lots of love. Yeah, it's called authenticity and not liking bullies. The spiritual guys are into open relationships or detachment in the name of cosmic love. Any advice on how to meet conscious men who want a committed relationship? Yeah, probably to trust your intuition, because I think there are a bunch of, quote, conscious men that do want committed relationship. I think that people sometimes confound non-attachment, which is a spiritual virtue, with biological attachment, which for most of us is a necessity to be in a relationship. So how can you acknowledge that we actually do want to bond and do want to get attached? And if I'm not willing to be attached to you in that way, it might be better for me just to be in the polyamory community, or to go be in a monastery or something. So I get that. I wouldn't try and convince anyone out of that position. I would probably just find a guy who has either gone through that cycle and maybe realizes it's not the path he wants to be on, or who has a bit more of a realistic view about biological attachment. And And I think they're out there. And I think actually, just from what I'm hearing from you, you probably can pick this up pretty quickly in people. I saw the video, not taking things too personally, and then I don't want to be breadcrumbed. What's the line between them? So you could have a position that says, I don't want to be breadcrumbed. And when I do get breadcrumbed, if that happens, it's actually not that much about me, right? I don't have to take that personally. It just might be that this isn't my person. So I don't have to create a huge narrative around it. I get that my person, my guy, isn't going to be breadcrumbing me. So that's where I'm putting my attention. And if you've breadcrumbed me, I want to feel if that feels, disappointing or hurtful. I want to feel that stuff because I'm authentic, but I don't need to create too much narrative around it. And I can move on knowing that you're not my guy. I think where people get in confusion is they're like, maybe this is my guy, but I don't think your guy ever breadcrumbs you. Any books for addictive personality that you can recommend? Not really. I would encourage you to look at the Enneagram because it's a different perspective on some of this stuff that I find very wholesome, but I'm not an addiction specialist. Jack, do you have a background in addiction recovery? No, actually, I don't. Some things you and Clayton seem to talk about seem similar to stuff discussed in recovery. I don't just mean using the word sobriety. Yeah, it is true. I use the word sobriety a lot, but that doesn't come from a addiction recovery or 12 steps kind of background. I think it's just that there's probably a lot of decent personal growth work that is done in that world. And so there's some similarities of language, but I really am not that familiar with that work. Clayton did release a video recently that you might want to go watch where he talked about some of his experiences with his dad, who was an alcoholic. So I can't really talk for him. Leah had the same spiritual guide attached. Later says he fears commitment, confused me, all these concepts. I was always committed in love with him. He broke up with me, it hurt. Yeah, totally. I think there's an irony in that for some people, their real spiritual path is about non-attachment. And then I think there's how does that really play into the relationship territory, which, by the way, is true, I think, of anything that's kind of spiritual, right? There's sort of high spiritual speak, like universal concepts, universal love. This is just a relative experience that we're having as humans, but we're spiritual beings on a human journey. All of that stuff, great stuff. And what actually happens when you get into a relationship with someone is, for most of us, I think, a much deeper spiritual path in some ways, because it's real and it's not based upon, concept. It's based upon actual experience. I am triggered. I am communicating inauthentically. I do notice I have longings that I can't name. I notice that I get into power struggles and dynamics with people. I'm not very good at sharing resources. I'm not very good at advocating for myself. I'm actually not very good at looking out for someone else's needs. I mean, there's so many things that relationship can teach us. That's why I think it's a really profound path. And, there might be Jack bias in that. Sure. I'm not really, I love living kind of up on a mountain. I'm not really drawn to the monastic life, although there's some things that could be appealing in that. So I think there's a lot of spiritual bypasses, probably another way of sort of talking about what you're pointing to. So for the first time in my life, says Gossi, I feel like giving up on romantic love, maybe need more me time. Any advice? So I don't know if this is true for you. One thing I do notice is that sometimes people have to give up on their idea of love, right? That they have a quite specific idea about romantic love. Like, he's going to say this, or it's going to feel this way, or we're going to be this kind of couple, or we're going to do these kind of things. And it might be good just to put that aside and just notice what is unfolding with a particular person. Because sometimes, obviously there's the Hollywood conception of romantic love. You might have a much more beautiful, poetic, nuanced, articulate orientation to what love is, romantic love is. And sometimes that can be the barrier, is that it's actually not always going to feel good, is that your triggers, your wounds and your shadows, your defenses, that's all going to show up in a love relationship much more than it will with your friends or your coworkers. So that being true, some people are in love with being in love. And actually what they've got to do is drop the fantasy. Like in my language, they've got to sober up a little bit and not get ahead of themselves, not have to build too much of a story around who this guy is or what this connection needs to be, but just to get a bit more scientific and observational of what is happening, what am I experiencing, what is my intuition about this guy. So I'm just putting that out there as a first hit, that if you want to give up on love, maybe just give up on your own notions of love. There's lots of things about relationship that aren't just about romantic love, right? A lot of relationship is about giving, and a lot of relationship is about learning how to love. I don't think this gets talked about enough. I don't think I've talked about it enough. But a lot of relationship is showing you where it's hard for you to love someone else, right? Either because they do a thing that you don't love yourself when you do it, or they do a thing that looked like something your mom did and you've got unmetabolized anger about it, or you project on other people, or you want to keep them in a certain, if you do this, this, and this, I can love you, but if you don't, I can't love you, or actually I only unconditionally love, and I've never gotten to reality that a lot of relationships also conditional love, right? There are boundaries, there are limits, there are agreements. We are curtailing each other's freedoms in a certain way, and that's okay and a good thing. So, all of that just to say there's so much we can learn about love that isn't about how we thought it was going to be, but more about how it actually is and can be. You look about 25 years old. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to be turning 37 shortly, but I'll take 25, and I don't have too much commentary about that. I'll check his video out. It sounds interesting. Thank you for your response. Do you think physical attraction is important to a lasting relationship? Yes, I do think it's important. I think it's a component amongst many that are also important. So for a lasting relationship, I think real compatibility is important. I think having a shared worldview is important. I think having some similarities of beliefs and values is important, and where you're not similar, that you're actually able to articulate and maybe expand the things that you can value, right? So let's say one person might value fun and spontaneity more than the other. Can you learn how to value fun and spontaneity so that you can align more with your partner? I think having some similar lifestyle can be useful, whether that's, we want to travel a lot, or we want a very home-based lifestyle, or we want to spend lots of time with friends, or we don't. So yes, I think it's important. If it's not there, I think it makes things a lot harder. And I think you might end up with more of a companionate love than also having a kind of romantic sexual love. But I think a lot of people really prioritize that piece, and then they miss all these other things. Like, I was so attracted to him that I missed that we're on very different spiritual paths, that we actually don't value family in the same way, that we have very different philosophies about life. And, of course, different philosophies can add color and texture, but it's almost like the deeper worldview of who you think you are and what you think life is that's really important. Hey, live chat again. Unfortunately, I only got Corona on. Could you tell me a good Enneagram website or video? I want to answer your survey. I'm not sure if I knew them accurately. Yeah, I learned with the Enneagram Institute. So enneagraminstitute.com can be a good place to start. And if you come and do deeper work with me, I also have my own Enneagram course that I sometimes make available to people. So I imagine I've got an upcoming course that I'm going to start enrolling in the coming weeks, and my Enneagram Masterclass will be part of that. So that could also be a good place to look. And with that, I think I've gotten through all of your questions. So thank you so much for them. And I appreciate you all being here. I'm wishing you well. I'm rooting for you in this time. If you're watching this after the event, feel free to post a question under the video as a comment. I will get to them. And I will also probably, if you've liked this, I will probably try and do another live stream kind of during this period. I guess we don't really know quite how long this period is going on. Please like this video, helps me get the word out. I'm also just posting my link to PayPal. Sometimes people support this channel by sending a small payment or thank you or gratitude. I really appreciate that when you do. So this is the link, paypal.me/realjackbutler. To any of you that have already done that, I really appreciate it. Thank you. And kind of good to be with you guys. Chin up, as we say, or I used to say, I guess, when I lived in the UK. I think we'll get through this, and I think we'll be more connected internally as we do that. So I hope you take this opportunity for what I'm calling the great inward turn. If you've got further questions about that, let me know. And as always, I'm Jack. Thanks for being here.